It was around 11 a.m. on August 23, 2008, when 51-year-old Michael Edwin Hearon was last seen in the woods near his property. The circumstances surrounding his disappearance were so bizarre that those investigating did not have a good explanation for what had happened to him. He left no clues behind except for one piece of puzzling evidence, which left more questions than answers. Mike Heron was born on June 15, 1957 in Maryville, Tennessee, where he spent the majority of his life. He ran a successful building business and had two sons named Andy and Matt. Mike had a condo in Maryville, but also owned a 100-acre property in Happy Valley, Tennessee, which he visited most weekends. It's here where he would end up vanishing without a trace. At 9:30 a.m. on Saturday, August 23, 2008, Mike Heron called his son Andy to let him know that he would be coming by his place to pick up a lawnmower. Mike wanted to mow down some grass on a neighboring property beside his plot in Happy Valley, and Andy was storing the mower. Andy informed his father that he was not home at the moment, but said he would be returning soon. He told Mike that if he didn't want to wait for him, he could load the mower onto his truck himself. Shortly after this exchange, Andy hung up the phone and proceeded to drive home. On his way back, he passed Mike driving in the opposite direction. Unbeknownst to Andy, this passing glance at his father would be the last time he ever saw him. It was not unusual for Mike to go a weekend without talking to his sons, but by the following Monday, they had still not heard a word from him. This prompted Andy and Matt to drive up to their father's property to investigate. Once they arrived, the two were met with an intriguing scene. Nothing was out of place inside his home, but Mike was nowhere to be found. His vehicle was parked on the property unlocked with his wallet and keys on the dash, presumably where he left them on Saturday. What was most bizarre about the scene, however, was the discovery of Mike's mower, still in the trailer hitched onto his truck, completely untouched. If Mike had arrived at his property early Saturday morning and was planning to mow during the weekend, why was the mower not even unloaded from his vehicle by Monday? This immediately raised red flags for Andy and for Matt. At around 12 p.m. that day, they alerted their family members of Mike's vanishing and began to do a search of the area themselves. After a few hours, they found no sign of Mike, but they did notice that his ATV was not on his property. They also spoke to a neighbor who claimed to have witnessed Mike heading off into the forest on his ATV at around 11 a.m. the previous Saturday. At this point, Andy and Matt feared that their father had gotten into some sort of accident with his ATV and was out in the forest somewhere. This prompted Andy to call the local Blount County Sheriff's Office to inform them about the situation. About an hour after the call at 6 p.m., officers showed up to the property. Due to the ongoing rain, however, they decided they would do a proper search of the area the following morning. The investigating officers believed that the ATV was the key piece of evidence in this case, and that if they found it, they would inevitably find Mike. This turned out not to be the case, however. On Tuesday morning, a group that consisted of police officers, some of Mike's family members, and his friends was assembled to conduct a search for him. At around noon that day, Mike's abandoned ATV was discovered in the woods about a mile away from his property. Mike did not own the land it was found on, and there was no logical reason why he would have taken his ATV there. What was even more bizarre, however, was the fact that the vehicle was left with the ignition on. Matt stated that his father would never leave his ATV running because he was adamant about saving battery. This was proof to him that his father did not willingly leave the vehicle there, but that something happened to him which caused him to abandon it. There was no physical evidence that suggested this, however, and investigators had nothing to go on but the ATV. The following morning, on Wednesday, August 27th, deputies and more than 50 community volunteers conducted a search in the surrounding area where Mike's ATV was discovered. They did not find a single sign of him, and the dogs could not track his scent anywhere. Over the next few days, dozens of miles were covered in the surrounding area where Mike's ATV was found. Helicopters and drones were deployed as well. Despite this, however, absolutely nothing was ever found, and the search for him was eventually called off. But what could have happened to Michael Heron? One theory is that he was attacked by an animal, but there's no evidence to suggest this, like blood or clothing fibers. Another theory is that Mike was silenced after discovering a cannabis growing operation, but once again, there's just no concrete evidence pointing that direction. To this day, no new leads have been discovered, and no one has heard from Michael Edwin Heron since August 23, 2008. The vanishing of Nicole Louise Morin in 1985 is known as one of the most baffling disappearances in Toronto's history. This is because she disappeared in what seemed to be an impossibly short amount of time from a high-traffic area. Despite the search for her being the largest missing persons investigation ever conducted in Toronto, not one trace of her was ever found. Nicole Morin was born on April 1, 1977, to Arthur and Jeanette Morin. She was 8 years old on July 30, 1985, when she vanished from her apartment complex in the Etobicoke borough of Toronto. At around 10:45 a.m. that day, Nicole began getting ready to go to her building complex's pool for a play date she had planned with her friend Jennifer. Shortly after she changed into her swimsuit, Jennifer called Nicole's home phone from the intercom downstairs to let her know she was waiting in the lobby. Nicole told her she was coming and hung up the phone. Before leaving, Nicole said bye to her mother Jeanette, who was busy running her at-home daycare at the time. Unbeknownst to Jeanette Morin, this mundane exchange would be the last time she ever saw her daughter. At approximately 11 a.m. that day, Nicole left her 20th floor apartment and began making her way towards the elevator. Downstairs in the lobby, Jennifer was patiently waiting her arrival. After 15 minutes passed, however, Nicole had still not showed up. The elevator ride down should have taken Nicole less than 2 minutes, so Jennifer was wondering why she still had not arrived. Jennifer called Nicole's home phone through the intercom again to find out what was happening, but it was her mother who picked up this time. Jennifer informed Jeanette that Nicole had not come down and asked if she knew where she went. Jeanette said that Nicole was probably just at the pool already and told Jennifer she should go check. Jennifer then went to the pool as Jeanette suggested, but Nicole was nowhere to be found. She waited around for a while and then proceeded to go back to the lobby in case Nicole showed up. She never did, however. Jennifer figured that Nicole had just become occupied with something else, so she decided to go home. By 3 p.m. on July 30th, Nicole had still not returned home. At this point, her mother began to worry, so she decided to call the police. Shortly after, they would arrive at the complex. Police immediately jumped into action and took Nicole's disappearance very seriously. They first set up roadblocks around the building so nobody could leave and circulated vehicles with PA systems to alert neighborhood residents to the missing child's description. They then proceeded to enter each of the 429 units in the complex, even if the individual who owned the unit wasn't home at the time. They found absolutely no trace of Nicole, however. The following day, dozens of police officers, mounted horsemen, helicopters, and foot patrols were dispatched to comb the area surrounding Nicole's building for any possible clues or witnesses. Tracking dogs were also brought in to explore the inside of the building for any trace of Nicole. Hundreds of neighborhood residents joined in on the search as well. On top of this, thousands of posters showing Nicole's picture were printed and posted around the area throughout the following week. Over the course of the investigation, Toronto police invested 25,000 man-hours following up leads, making Nicole's vanishing the biggest missing person investigation in the history of the Toronto Police Department. Despite spending almost $2 million on the investigation and interviewing over 6,000 people, however, no evidence was discovered which could have given investigators an idea of what might have happened to Nicole. The disappearance of Nicole Morin is very perplexing due to the extremely small time frame in which she vanished. One witness interviewed by police claimed they saw Nicole enter the elevator from her floor, but we know that she did not make it to the lobby because her friend Jennifer was there and she never saw her. This means that Nicole somehow vanished in the mere 2 minutes it would have taken the elevator to go from her floor to the lobby. If Nicole fell victim to a crime of opportunity, it would have been extremely brazen for the perpetrator to abduct her from the elevator, especially considering it was broad day in a heavily trafficked residential area. Even if this was the case, where could the perpetrator have taken Nicole after the fact? Every unit was searched and tracking dogs were used in the building, meaning that if somebody had taken her into their unit, something would have most likely been discovered. If Nicole was taken outside, on the other hand, how did nobody see anything? It was a warm summer's day, and there were dozens of people out and about in the vicinity. It's hard to believe that no one would have reported seeing anything if Nicole was taken outside of the building. The most shocking part about Nicole's vanishing, however, is the fact that no concrete evidence was ever discovered, even though the search for her was the largest in Toronto's history. Investigators in the case were completely baffled that they didn't manage to find anything useful which could have actually pointed them in the right direction. There were a few bizarre discoveries during the investigation for Nicole which could have been related to her vanishing, however. Shortly after Nicole went missing, her father Arthur found a note that was written by her a few months before her disappearance. In it, Nicole eerily wrote the words, "I'm going to disappear." It's unclear if this was a mere coincidence, however, or if the note was something more. Nonetheless, it's rather bizarre that Nicole would write such a thing in her notebook just months before she would actually disappear. Another discovery, which might be related to Nicole's vanishing, was a witness sighting of a strange individual in the building shortly before Nicole went missing. According to the police report, a tenant in the building noticed a blonde woman lurking on the 20th floor right around the time of Nicole's vanishing. The witness did not recognize the woman and claimed that they had never seen her before or since. Police sought her out as a potential suspect, but she was never identified. It's unknown to this day if she had anything to do with Nicole's vanishing, but the fact that an unidentified individual was on her floor around the time of the disappearance is suspicious to many. Almost 4 decades later, the vanishing of Nicole Morin remains one of the most shocking cases in Toronto's history. The lack of evidence, despite the thorough searches coupled with the strange circumstances surrounding her disappearance, leave this case shrouded in mystery. While her vanishing is considered a cold case now, Toronto police and missing child organizations continue to keep it in the public eye in an effort to garner fresh leads with the hope of one day getting some answers. The vanishing of Barbara Assunta Bolick in 2007 remains one of the strangest disappearances that ever took place in Montana. She went missing while in close proximity to an acquaintance in an area she was very familiar with. Not one shred of evidence was ever discovered, and investigators never got any solid leads in her case. Barbara Bolick was born on August 25, 1951 in Montana, and she was 55 at the time of her disappearance. Barbara was an avid hiker who spent much of her free time in the wilderness. She was particularly fond of the Bitter Root Mountains near Victor, Montana, and would often visit with her husband, Carl Bolick. In July of 2007, Carl's cousin, Donna Bolick, was visiting Montana from California along with her boyfriend, Jim Rawmaker. Since the two rarely went to Montana, Barbara was excited to take them on a hike up the Bitter Root Mountains. Little did Barbara know, however, this hike would be her last. Barbara had planned to take Donna and Jim up the Bitter Root Mountains early in the morning on July 18, 2007. Her husband Carl would not be joining this time, however, because he had suffered a heart attack some months prior and had to give up hiking. Unfortunately, Donna could not make it either that day, as she had drank the previous night and was hungover. As such, only Barbara and Jim embarked on the hike together, while Carl and Donna remained at the Bolick residence. Barbara and Jim arrived at the Bitter Root Mountains at approximately 9 a.m. that morning. Barbara had planned to take Jim up to the Bear Creek Overlook, one of her favorite spots in the area with a stunning view of the Bitter Root Mountains and valley. The two began making their way up the trail, and by 12 p.m., they had almost reached the overlook. At this point, Jim was fascinated with the landscape, so he took a few steps off the trail and turned towards the scenic view to admire it. Barbara was following close behind, about 20 feet away, according to Jim. Jim was completely immersed in the environment for about 1 minute until he turned back around to talk to Barbara. When he did, however, he was shocked to see that she was nowhere near him. He was immediately confused because she was in plain view of him just moments before. Jim did not panic, however, because he thought that Barbara might have just continued walking. After looking up and down the trail, blowing a whistle and calling her name with no response, Jim quickly realized that something was wrong. As such, he went back down the trail as quickly as he could and alerted authorities. He also informed Carl and Donna about what happened. Police arrived shortly after Jim called him and immediately arranged a search for Barbara. Dozens of officers, search and rescue professionals, as well as dogs were dispatched to look for Barbara. Despite this, however, not a single trace of her was ever discovered. Cadaver dogs were brought to the area over the following months, but they never got a hit, and Barbara was never seen again. But what could have happened to Barbara Bolick? The obvious suspect in her disappearance was Jim Rawmaker, as he was the last person to have seen her that day. Many simply couldn't believe Jim's story of Barbara vanishing into thin air during the very brief moment he turned around to look at the scenery. As such, it's speculated by some that Jim and Barbara got into some sort of argument that led to a physical altercation. While this does seem like a plausible scenario given the circumstances, there are several factors which point away from Jim. For one, Jim had absolutely no reason to hurt Barbara. They only saw each other a few times a year, and there were no problems between them. Furthermore, some reports claim that Jim personally asked to take a lie detector test. If something had happened between them, he surely would not have requested such a thing. On top of this, Jim told police about 2 other hikers he and Barbara encountered on their way up the trail on the day she vanished. Police confirmed that there were indeed 2 other hikers on the trail that day who matched the description Jim provided, but they never came forward. If Jim had harmed Barbara, why would he have been so forthcoming with police when he could have just lied and said they didn't see anyone on the trail that day? These don't appear to be the actions of somebody trying to hide something. But if Jim's story is to be believed, then what could have possibly happened to Barbara? A few theories regarding the vanishing of Barbara Bolick have been brought up over the years. Some believe that Barbara may have fallen victim to an animal attack. Others believe that somebody may have taken the opportunity to abduct her while Jim wasn't paying attention. The problem with both of these theories, however, is that Jim was simply too close to Barbara to not have seen or heard anything. Some instead speculate that nothing nefarious happened at all, and Barbara may have just continued up the path and gotten injured somehow. But this too is improbable because she could not have gotten so far in such a short time frame, and cadaver dogs never picked up her scent in the area. Other theories have been proposed since Barbara's vanishing, although none have been concrete, and her disappearance remains a complete mystery. We sincerely hope that the families of Michael Hearon, Nicole Morin, and Barbara Bolick will one day have closure.